Simon, you're very welcome again to Kickoff Sessions. I really appreciate you coming back for another episode. Our first episode went really well. It was all focused around young professionals starting out, which is exactly where I'm pretty much at, a couple of years into my experience. So I think that was awesome because you've had, 2 decades at this stage working in big firms and getting all that insights on how to approach networking, how to approach even interviewing and whatnot was super valuable. So today would be a completely different slant. And that's what's going to be really cool, looking at turning professions, looking at turning things into profession from your interests and hobbies, which I think is
Sure.
really a new opportunity for people now at kind of my age and what people are trying to do more and more, really.
Absolutely, Darren. Well, yeah, thanks for having me back on. The last show was a pleasure. So, yeah, anytime.
Yeah, of course, of course. So I think what was really cool now is about the fact that, you were started off in Goldman, you went on to more investment banks and whatnot, and then you completely went 180 into entrepreneurship. Now, I don't know how common that is, but I don't really see that many people do it as much as you have. So how have you even just seen yourself when you went from taking the salary to making the salary? How has that experience been from you at the very beginning?
Yeah, it was I mean, it's a big change, and there are several, I guess, things one has to get used to when you go from working in a big corporate with a big title,
Mhm.
um, to working for yourself. And I mean, some of the things that you go through early on. One is you all of a sudden you feel as though you've lost some prestige because you've got a business card that could open doors for you just by virtue of where you worked. You had a title, you had people reporting to you, and all of this kind of makes the ego feel good.
Mhm.
And then it's just Simon Ree, who the hell is he? I haven't got Goldman Sachs on my business card anymore. That's not going to open, my personal brand isn't going to open as many doors for me as the company that I worked for used to. So that's the first thing to deal with is just that kind of loss of identity to an extent. And we can talk about ways you can mitigate that. Secondly, it's all of a sudden you become very self-reliant. And I remember, days where I'd spend half a day fixing the bloody printer. You work in a corporate and you ring a help desk and somebody comes and fixes the printer and you use one of the other 13 printers while that one's getting fixed. Your printer goes down and it's a real pain. You run out of stationery. Oh God, I've got to, run down to Officeworks or whatever and buy some printer toner or whatever it is.
Mhm.
So a lot more self-reliance. And then, of course, the biggest difference is when you work for a corporate, you get this paycheck that basically just comes into your account every month unless you really screw things up. But generally, it's pretty reliable. And you go from that to a situation where you don't have that same continuity of income, and it is really all down to your efforts. The downside of that is it comes with a certain amount of stress. The upside is you're not subject to somebody else's opinion of you. You're not subject to pay rises or discretionary bonuses or some corporate HR framework that dictates what your upside is.
Yeah.
So if you're a self-starter and you're ambitious and you're hardworking, it's an enormous benefit.
Mhm.
If you're not a risk taker and you just like that, steady paycheck coming in every month, it's probably a massive shock.
Mhm. How did you even deal with kind of the kind of anxiety of being so self-reliant? Because as you said, like the pressure's all on you, and no matter what happens, you're gonna have to. It's input versus output. So did you see yourself really throw more hours at it in the beginning and trying to compensate for that, or were you well aware that you couldn't figure things out?
I threw a lot of hours at it just because it's necessary. When you're building a new business, there's a lot of work involved, and you don't know 50% of it until you actually start, and
Yeah.
you realize just how much work is involved. I was never concerned about, I guess, making a living from it because at the end of the day, I thought, well, I mean, I can trade. I've got a skill set, and that's really how I've been making the majority of my living since I left the corporate world behind. So trading is an important skill set, and it's one that's enabled me to, pay the rent and put 3 kids through
Mhm.
private school and, do all of those sorts of things. Um, Really, the business side of things, the more entrepreneurial side of things, is it's part of my mission rather than something that
That was like a
I
hobby.
need to do to put food on the table. Yeah, well, it's you know, I reached this point in my career where I'd spent 2.5 decades in the corporate world, helping people who were already wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. And it was more a question of what is my marginal contribution to society? And when I analyzed that, I didn't really feel very good about it. And I recognized there was a real gap in the market for people who are not already extremely wealthy. The investment products available to them tend to be not that good. They tend to be expensive. And there are a whole bunch of myths and outright lies that get told to the general public. And so I guess my vision, if you want to call it that, was to create a group of people who become more creative, more entrepreneurial, happier, all because I've managed to help them reduce the burden of financial stress.
Mm. And I think a big thing about that is that you've shown over the last 2 decades that you like understood markets, you understood like people's desires and where the cracks were. And that's a big thing, I think, because you came at it with a lot of experience. But a lot of people may
Yeah.
not originally, or they may have an idea or think like, okay, this segment of the market is correct. But you really lived and breathed it for so many years. And you obviously got a lot of enjoyment from it. But then you kind of had that introspective look saying, okay, maybe I could be doing more to society. And I think we mentioned this in our last podcast before, that that's a big thing about when you turn like 30 or 40, is that you've been taking from the world for so many years, as a kid, you're reliant on your family. Then when you get older, you want to like experience as much as from life as possible. And then as you get older, it appears to me that you want to give back more. And I think it was cool there because there's the opportunity of, okay, there's a lack of financial information, and we've seen the downsides of that and people getting burnt so hard recently. And then we also see the element then you're like, okay, I can provide a viable contribution. So it's a nice kind of like harmony, I suppose, between the two.
Yeah. And as you sort of alluded to, I think it's a journey a lot of people go through and reach at a certain point in their life. Yeah, you realize that you become more contribution centric in your approach to your way of life and what you do.
Yeah, for definite. You mentioned earlier as well about like, the kind of, you had the prestige, you had everything, and really now there's so much more like kind of external pressures because people are like, oh, what's Simon doing, thinking he can do this or start this. How did you kind of even approach something like that? Because huge for my generation is, what do people think of me? It's all the what ifs.
Yeah.
What if people think that this sucks? What if like, my close friends think that I've changed and whatnot? And that's a huge part of,
Mhm.
people of all generations, really, So what was a big thing for you? Because we all have to take that leap and the difficulty at first, putting your head out there and saying, yeah, I'm going to go down this route, can be also very challenging.
I think, speaking just from my own personal experience, I never defined myself by my job or my career. And I reckon most of my friends, none of my friends really had a clue exactly what I did. They knew I worked in a bank, but I never talked about work much, and I never defined myself by my career. I've seen too many people become retrenched or retire and just completely lose their identity, and it's they just fall into a depression. So whether it was conscious or not, it was not something I ever really did. But I mean, some of the things you miss are honestly, it's almost embarrassing. But when you work for a big bank and you've got a good job, you fly business class everywhere, you stay in five-star hotels everywhere, and it sounds incredibly hollow. But I mean, those are the things that in those first couple of months when you're traveling economy and staying at motels, you sort of think, oh, yeah, I miss that former life a little bit.
Yeah.
But you get over that pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's funny because you like, usually the opposite is romanticized. So when you're working for yourself, it's like, oh yeah, you've all this freedom, you can work from anywhere you want. But it's actually the opposite. It's like, I need to really watch my cash because this is the only inflow of cash at the moment. I can't be, going to fancy restaurants, getting $100 steaks and whatnot, because if I do this, I can't afford my marketing budget. If I do this, I can't afford any sort of product. Like you can't really do anything, So you'd be very careful with understanding it and being able to say, okay, this is my new lifestyle now. And going backwards is also very difficult. People find that, it's very hard to give up what you already have.
Yeah, that's true. It is true. But like I said, these are kind of fairly hollow, inconsequential considerations. It's just but they're things that most people will go through that they may not have considered until it happens. But you come out the other side pretty quickly, I find.
Mhm.
And you're to your point about freedom, the amount of freedom that you do pick up is considerable. I mean, yeah, there's work involved, but you work on what you want, when you want, the hours you want. The idea of having to ask somebody else's permission to take a day off kind of seems really banal to me.
Yeah, yeah. And
Even
then,
though that was my life for most of my life.
of course, as an adult, it's like asking to go to the bathroom as a kid, when you're in
Yeah.
school, and then it's like the flip side to it. Um, I think what's really important for like our generation, or even for myself, is about, if you're starting something and you want to make sure that it's like sustained and for the long period, because we don't want to start up a project and then 2 months later crash it down and go back to what we're doing originally. So like, how
Mhm.
for you like has been like picking like, okay, I'm going to provide training education under trading. You've seen that it's a real long commitment for yourself. You can see that your whole life has been around trading, which has been really great. But for younger people, how did they kind of identify that and say, okay, this is what I'm going to stick with and try to work on and build on, and not just give up over the course of 2-3 years, even at the best?
Well, I think you got to build a vision, and you got to build a mission. So your vision is your contribution centric objective of what you want to achieve with your business, and your mission is what are you going to do every day to bring your vision into reality. And your vision has got to be something that resonates with you at an emotional level, that fills you with vibrational excitement, if you like, something that you believe in and that you really want to achieve. And then the mission and it does. I'm not talking about a mission statement so much, but maybe even kind of steps. So you got the macro and the micro, if you like. The mission is what keeps you true to the vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you've got a vision that resonates with you, that you believe in, that excites you, when you talk about it, you get excited, you feel energized. It's much easier to stick with. If you're just doing something for the money, you think, oh yeah, I'll do this because I'll make a bit of money on it. That's when you're going to run into trouble, because despite what people think, the money actually is not going to keep you motivated. It
Of
just
course.
doesn't. If your vision doesn't fill you with, I would call it vibrational excitement.
Mhm.
It's probably going to tire you out one day, even if you are making a good living from it.
That's quite interesting, because if you think about like anything that is, people like the kind of Hollywood kind of moment of, oh yeah, this is what I'm trying to achieve, like I'm building a company and I'm going to be the CEO. But the nitty gritty is your day-to-day tasks. It's the BAU tasks, the stuff that is monotonous and repetitive, and usually people just don't want that. People just want the North Star, that this is what I want and this is what I want to achieve. So to your point, they want the vision, but they don't want to do the execution of the day to day. And that's where you,
Yeah.
you fall behind. And like, even if you were writing your book, obviously at first there's a bit of excitement at first, and telling your
Mm.
your mates and your family. But then then you're on page 100, you're halfway through, you're stuck in the weeds. It's very difficult to keep your consistency unless you really do love it. And even if someone like yourself, who was so interested in it, may have came with the difficulties every once in a while, to say, like, look, this has become a bit more challenging than what I thought.
Oh man, I've always been a get shit done kind of guy, but I can tell you, writing the book, my sock drawer had never looked so neat. I really did discover my inner procrastinator, and Stephen Pressfield in his book The War on Art, he talks about the resistance, and I never really knew what that meant until I started writing a book. And oh yeah, but that's just where you've got to build
what
a habit.
Why do you think that was, though? What, because like you are like a super organized
Yeah,
dude, like, so like.
I can't give you a good explanation for it, but I would procrastinate, and I would make excuses, and I would, find other things to be busy with. Not all. I mean, don't get me wrong. I actually did finish the book,
Of course.
and I finished it in about 6 months. But I probably could have done it in half the time if I eliminated all the procrastination.
Yeah, and that was really your kind of first step into, kind of building your business and starting it up from there as well. So like, it could have been very easy to say, look, this isn't for me. I'll come back to it in a year. I'll come back to it in 2 years. Whereas like, when you just, even if you ran over time, so you're like 6 months, whatever, that seems a bit much for yourself when you look back on it. But 6 months is not a long time to write a book if you compare it to all the other people. Like, so even outside your
Yeah,
own
no, I don't
timelines.
think it was. It's 342 pages. It's a proper
So
book.
Yeah.
It's not an ebook or a pamphlet. Um, so yeah, I think 6 months is fair, and then the publishing process takes another 6 months as well. So it was quite a decent chunk of time from go to woe.
Mhm.
But again, with the book, I had a vision. Um, every options book I've ever read, it was kind of hard and boring and dry. And I wanted to write a book on options trading that was fun and easy and approachable and engaging.
Mhm.
And yeah, based on 95% of the feedback I've received, I think I succeeded in that. But
Of course.
again, just having that vision, this book doesn't exist, and I want to create it. I want to make it exist. Is really kind of your North Star, or it
Of
was
course.
my North Star.
I think what's cool about that vision as well is it kind of feeds into like, like success criteria. So actually podcast with a guy last week and we are discussing about like, what is like a successful outcome for starting your own side business or starting your own company. Like where do you define success, and more importantly, where do you define failure? So like what's your kind of approach to that? Because his advice and my kind of approach was that, okay, we put so much emphasis on getting something good and getting something perfect, but then we don't really never know when to stop or to take appreciation and think, okay, I've got to a certain level. So were you looking in terms of like book purchases and I don't know, different things like this? Because if people are starting something, it's good to know what you're trying to achieve and then working backwards versus, okay, I'm just going to do it because it seems like the best thing to do at the time.
I mean, there's a couple of ways to go there. I mean, in terms of the book, I mean, book sales and making #1 bestseller and all of that. I mean, at one sense, they're kind of vanity metrics.
Hmm.
But at the same time, there's no point writing a book if nobody's going to read it. So you do want to get that book in people's hands. Otherwise, it's just been a waste of effort. So, yeah, I want people to buy my book and read it and love it, and hopefully, some of the people who buy my book like it enough that they want to work with me longer term
Hmm.
and learn kind of all of the ins and outs about trading. In terms of the business, like I said, the vision is it's pretty general. I mean, I don't even really talk about trading in my vision. I just want people, I want people to live better lives because I've helped them reduce the burden of financial stress. Stress is one of those things that impairs your decision making, impairs your quality of life. And if people are living more creative, more artistic, more entrepreneurial lives, because I've helped them reduce the burden of financial stress, that's my vision achieved. In terms of my mission, how do I do it? Well, I like to think that I'm revolutionizing the way finance is taught by shattering long-held myths and beliefs
Hmm.
about finance that have
Of
been
course.
deliberately perpetrated by Wall Street.
Of course, yeah, and
And
it's
so
always
they
been kept
are,
so difficult.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of, that's my vision, that's my mission. Yeah, I mean, in terms of how many people become members, that's a metric that you can track. So it is important, but it's a byproduct of the vision. It's not the vision itself. I want to make X dollar in sales or something like that.
Of course, yeah.
If you
It's kind of
if you're
it kind of depends, sorry,
you've got to
on
be
like
process
what
driven.
yeah, exactly what the process is. It depends if you want it to be, purely like revenue generating, like say you need the money, so you started something that you're like, okay, I put all my cash into this, or is it like yourself where you have a purpose for it? I think that's quite interesting. Like, so if you want to help people and provide a service, which you're doing through your courses and whatnot, or is it you're providing a product to ultimately help people? I think it's quite difficult for people to draw the line often.
So, but I think if you're going into a business because you're passionate about it, you love it, you enjoy it, you love talking about it, you love teaching people about it, you're going into it for the right reasons. And if you do a good job of that, the financial rewards will flow. They
Yeah,
just absolutely will. If you're going into a business purely to make money, I think people can smell that. And I think you'll eventually run out of energy because business is tough. Life is tough. Um, and if you haven't got a strong mission, a strong vision behind you, you will probably give up at some point.
And especially like over the last couple of years, I think people have become way more aware. They can smell bullshit straight away, and they can see when someone is like not authentic, when someone is purely doing it just because they think it's a cash and grab or whatnot. And those people eventually will kind of peel off. And what you're often left with is like people then that stay consistent and can spend 5-10 years building something that is quite difficult. And that's what's quite interesting. I remember I was speaking to someone a couple weeks back, and Matt just saying that, at the moment, if I'm podcasting and let's say it's coming in and out, it's doing well, some weeks it's doing not great, some other weeks, he was saying, if you can just stay alive and stay consistent, you'll ultimately end up being, one of the best, or have another service, or be able to build a business around it, because you've just stayed alive. You enjoy what you're doing, and you also are just super consistent, so there's kind of that kind of parallel going together versus short-term benefits. And that's a big thing I always discuss as well, is like, not sacrificing long-term goals for short-term happiness, the quick buck and whatnot. And I think it's cool because like that's where you need to kind of think of the longer-term vision, and that's where it all goes back to, is this what you're fundamentally interested in and hopefully passionate about?
And just, you made a superb point there on consistency. I think consistency is a superpower. It's because consistency can be boring, consistency can be hard, and that's why a lot of people don't have it. And I mean, it's the same in business. It's the same in trading. If you can just survive, if you can survive your first 6 months trading and not lose money, you're almost guaranteed to be making good money down the track. And this is why I harp on about risk management so much. If you can just survive those first few weeks or those first few months, your odds of being very successful are really, really good. And I think it's the same in business. And as you've just said, it's the same in podcasting. If you can just hang in there and survive, when most other people who are going through that would give up or lose energy, you will reap the benefits.
What's really cool there as well, as you said, like staying alive from like a portfolio financial perspective. So like usually if you have a good kind of base knowledge, or you're learning in parallel, trying to learn a bit of, kind of education, you mitigate that stages, and then you're going to fundamentally get better from there. You're just going to slowly improve through time, and that was a good, that's to your point, your post during the week, which is, start first, then edit second, just get going, get up and going, build your experience that way. And I think that's where it becomes so much more valuable than waiting around and not really kind of having a good strategy, and not putting time under the mic or time on the charts, and really putting like your practice into play, really. And that can be quite challenging to say, I'm not going to use a demo account anymore. I'm going to go in and actually trade my own money and become a bit more experienced that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to your point about editing later, act first. I think it's so important, that whole ready, fire, aim approach, because one of my mentors said to me years ago that the worst kind of action is inaction. And I mean, that's certainly borne itself out in my life. Yes, you'll make mistakes, but you can always course correct. And mistakes, so long as you own them and are accountable for them and correct them, very rarely are they that big of a deal.
And timing is everything, I find as well. So like 100% agree with that, because the big thing for me when I was starting out was I need to be pulling all these different social media platforms. I need to be showing up on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on here. I need to do video, I need to do audio. And I didn't do that. Instead, I was doing like one thing at a time. And I look back and regret saying, oh, I should have showed up more. I should have done more. I should have done this. When in fact, what was right for me at the time was taking things step by step, and then identifying the issues that happened, So really, when I did act then, could have been starting a YouTube channel, could have been starting this. They were terrible in the beginning. They were really, really awful in the beginning. And then you see the small tweaks, because if you think about it logically, it's easier to tweak something that's already in existence than to start something new, And a perfect example
absolutely.
is like,
that's a great point, actually.
Because like a lot of the clips that I would make, for instance, so I learned how to record and edit video at the moment, right? And it's fucking complicated. It's really complicated to do it really well. There's something in my brain that just doesn't work that well with it. I just find it difficult. And I'm looking at things and I know that they're pretty shit. And then I would say it to my girlfriend as well. I was like, this is shit. What should I do? And we're like, okay, let's look at this small change and that small change. And if you literally scroll through like a list of my videos, you'll see them slowly getting better. And even it was like this morning, I was looking back at them and I was like, yeah, I could tighten things up, make font cleaner, a bit smaller. And they're just small kind of bits. And then you compare that to, say, I don't know, you might know James Smith. He's a big podcaster from the UK. He's based in Australia now. Like he's 5-10 years experience. You look at his stuff and you think that's completely out of range. where it's not, because he was often at that stage in the very beginning. And so was people like yourself who started trading, and you could look at yourself and get intimidated and say you'll never get to that stage, where it's like, I know for a fact you've made terrible trades over the course of your lifetime as well as many good ones, but you've learned from them though, and that's very, very vital to do along the way.
Absolutely. I mean, mistakes are always forgivable, provided you don't keep repeating them. And which goes to your point, you've got to learn from your mistakes, and that means owning them and accepting them, and not blaming other people. As soon as you start trying to shift blame, you rob yourself of your power. Whereas if you just own up to it and say, "Yep, I did it. I know why I did it. This is how I'm going to correct it. This is what I'm going to do differently." It's incredibly empowering.
And actually, that just reminded me of the post you had around ownership with what's the guy's name again?
Jocko.
Jocko, yeah. So like Jocko's 101 with this, just like, that's from a leadership perspective, and he absolutely nails it in terms of like taking complete ownership for your decisions and for leading a pack and everything, and then not being just not having any great moments in your life, and that's very difficult to have. And you can kind of see that he's just been humbled from all the mistakes he's kind of made. And I think he was in Afghanistan, he was in Iraq, he was in a couple of different places, and it kind of feeds into David Goggins' kind of accountability aspect as well. So his whole thing is just like, whether it's good, whether it's bad, you're taking full accountability for your actions. And it's tough, man. It's tough. Like when things go wrong, you want to blame everything else, but when you realize that it's fundamentally you, that's where you can make the proper changes then, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean the problem is we're all raised from the age of 2 onwards. We are just doing our utmost to try and not screw anything up. All right, because if you screw up as a kid, your parents will scold you. If you screw up at school, your teachers will tell you off. Your friends will make fun of you. You screw up at work, your boss will yell at you. And so we're forever trying to never screw anything up, which tends to kind of reduce our appetite for taking risk. And it plays out in trading as well. I mean, the thing is, in trading, you're going to lose. The best traders in the world will lose 30% of their trades. And that sort of, I guess, mistake ratio in real life probably would be unacceptable. You know what I mean? But if you can get over that and sort of just let the ego go a little bit, and not be afraid of making a mistake. A lot of people think they're going to look silly if they make a mistake. But really and truly, if you've taken action and you've made a course correction, don't even call it a mistake. You're actually going to win people's respect.
I think trading is a really
the action takers in the world that make things happen. Sorry, go on.
Trading is the perfect example there, you said, because after you make the mistake, you have to get back on the horse and do it again.
Yeah.
And if
absolutely.
you're if you're worried and you're scared and you're thinking that, oh God, you've lost your confidence, it's the worst position to be in when there's literally money on the line. So you have to completely get back on track and kind of back yourself. It feeds into different aspects of business as well. Like if you've made mistakes in the past, you need to be able to get yourself together. Like, I don't know, get yourself back in check. And how did you even do that when you were trading? Like if you made a big mistake, did you have some sort of kind of recourse or like a habit that you would kind of use to get back on track?
Well, I guess I've just refined my process very early on to ensure that if I follow my trading plan, big mistakes were impossible. So it's all about taking lots of small risks and managing them all like a professional. And that way you can really avoid big mistakes.
And
yeah, exactly. I mean, emotional control is the one thing to work on every single day as a trader. So I keep a diary of my emotional state and how I'm feeling when I'm placing trades, and it can be quite instructive. If you can recognize what your emotional state was when you made a trade, it can be very enlightening. I have a no high fives rule, which means if I'm feeling like high fiving myself on how good I am at trading, it's time for me to cut risk very, very quickly. It usually means a teaching moment is just around the corner.
Yeah, a bit of overconfidence. When I recorded with Daniel Crosby, he said that was like the number one thing is like, you have your own confirmation bias, and you've continued, like, from an own psychological perspective, like you've built up all this like this essentially idea that you're correct, everyone else is wrong. This is great. I'm gonna beat the market. I'm gonna beat everyone else. And at that point, then he said, that's when you should stop. He's like, if you're in this position, and like, he's like, behavioral psychologist and in behavioral finance. And it was really interesting, and even him who like is so in tune with his own, like, his own awareness of his own behaviors. He said he makes these crazy irrational decisions from time to time, and he looks back and he's like, this is my profession. As as a guy with a PhD, and now he's even making those tendencies. So in all aspects of life, like, things can run away from you, but I think you need to just go back to center, saying, okay, this is my core of what I should be doing on a day to day.
Absolutely, and just having that roadmap, like if it's building a business, having that business plan, or that that mission statement. If it's trading, having your trading plan in writing on your desk within easy reach. What I say to people is, sometimes people will ask me, oh, I'm scared about this trade, or I'm nervous about this position. What should I do? And my answer is nearly always, well, what does your trading plan say you should do?
Should be defined
and if you
already.
don't, I mean, if you just refer back to your trading plan, all fear and uncertainty will disappear, because it will tell you exactly what you should be doing.
That feeds nicely into actually habits that I wanted to actually discuss about, because someone like yourself, you come across very organized and you have your shit together. Now, obviously, you may say it differently, but it looks like you always have your different elements of your life in check, and you've been able to kind of balance them really well. Like, what type of habits have you been really building since you've been on your own, or even since your actual corporate days? Like, it could be your daily habits and your schedule, because to get things going, get things flowing, you need to be on top of it from whatever time you begin to whatever time you finish in a day.
To me, it's all about balance and moderation. I wouldn't call myself a workaholic. I'll put in hard yards when I need to, and I'll reward myself with breaks when I need to. I think eating well most of the time, getting some exercise in nearly every day. Things like meditation can help a lot. I mean, I've got a young baby at the moment, so my daily routine is a little bit out of whack. So he's not sort of sleeping that well at the moment. So in terms of my daily routine, I don't really have one, to be honest, at the moment. But I used to.
Yeah, for trading especially, you'd need to have like a routine and kind of working through those different kind of areas.
But my biggest qualm at the moment is, balancing. Well, it's not even balancing. I'd love to focus more on business development, business growth. But my biggest overriding commitment is what do I owe my members, and giving my members a world-class, best-in-class experience is my number one priority above anything else.
That's 100%. It seems to be the best approach. When Amanda Slavin was on my show last week, she said, customer retention over customer acquisition every day. That's just the way it should be. How are you improving the experience of existing customers? How are you giving them more and providing them more services versus going for new customers? So kind of her point was like, these startups, they don't give a shit about their existing customers. They just want growth, more people. But if you cultivated the people within your membership group, offer them some additional stuff and whatnot, that's more lucrative than looking for continuously more customers. So that's quite interesting that you had that kind of approach.
It's also more rewarding, because you're doing a good job, you're delivering outstanding value, and you feel good about yourself when you look in the mirror and get up in the morning.
Yeah, of course. You can still have probably that reach of getting more people, though, if you were to bring in someone to help you with marketing or to help you with further kind of sales and stuff. And there's more opportunities there. But I suppose if you build it from within, improve what you have already, and then after that time, then you can, okay, I'm at a stage where I can look externally and try to find more people instead of just going growth,
Exactly. Yeah. So I've been, I think, very conservative and responsible in terms of how I've grown it. And look, I mean, it's been good. Could always be better, of course. But
of course,
delivering that member experience is paramount.
How has been developing a course? I know we spoke about it previously, but my before we start recording, one of my close friends was a videographer for a course being recorded at the moment. It's actually, funnily enough, a trading course as well. And I think he's been working on it for 6 months, and they still don't have they still don't actually have a version 1. out yet.
Wow.
And
Okay.
it's been 6 months long, and they're doing 3 courses in total. And he said it's been the heaviest shift he's ever done. And he's the videographer. He's not even the guy with the experience.
Right.
It's crazy.
Well, building a course is it's a lot of work. I mean, when I look at you know, the kind of the courses, the memberships that I offer, there would be over 60 hours worth of video there, plus a whole bunch of materials, you know, cheat sheets, blueprints, handouts, that type of thing. So it is a lot of work. I would estimate that for every hour of video, there's probably 6 hours of preparation. And that's excluding all of the kind of PDFs and what have you. So it is a lot of work to get it out off the ground. Fortunately, it's stuff that it's all up here. You know, I haven't had to kind of sit down and research it. It's just been a case of getting it out of here and, you know, into a video format that people can digest in a way that is simple and easy and fun and engaging for people to understand. And, you know,
that's quite
writing the
unique.
book, I think, was a good template for that in terms of how to communicate.
That's cool.
And
because it's completely
yeah,
organic.
the feedback I've had. Yeah. And so you know, one of the other, I guess, challenges you've got when you create a course is keeping people engaged with it. You know, you hope that they once they bought the course, they actually do the bloody thing, you know.
Yeah.
You know, the fact is we all buy clothes we never wear. We buy, you know, CDs we never listen to, or back in the day as CDs. But you know, we buy books we never read. Unfortunately, people do buy courses that they never end up taking. But it's about just having a nurture email sequence that just kind of nudges them and reminds them of, you know, you should be doing this module now, and this is what you're going to learn, and these are the objectives, and just trying to keep people as engaged as possible.
Where did you learn how to do this? So, like, you know, how to, like, firstly create a course, and then also to, you know, kind of keep the pressure on, because I know a lot of other courses do something similar, but it's quite difficult to know, like, how to build a community around a course. Is there some types of approaches that you've been using?
Well, I used to, when I was working at Goldman, I used to run training sessions for people on options. So, I mean, I was trading people who are kind of already up the curve and working in the finance industry, but I did have some experience in teaching professionally, and not as a teacher, but as a senior member of staff. And so I leveraged a lot of that and just kind of made it simpler and, you know, tried to throw out as much jargon as possible. Unfortunately, when you're talking about options trading, a certain amount of jargon is necessary, but making it as relatable and real world as possible. And, you know, I had kind of a test group of people who went through the course initially. You know, I had about 50 people, and, you know, I got a lot of feedback from them and kind of made a few alterations here and there and just kind of shaped it a little bit to bang some of the rough edges off. So, you know, it's iterative. It's not one and done.
Of course.
But I think for the time being, where my programs are at, they're working, they're good, they're getting great feedback, and people seem very happy with them.
That seems to be like a really good product kind of development loop that you're running, like using feedback to essentially improve the existing product. Because a lot of people might say, look, this is my product, I'm going to push it out to the world and let it sit there. But you've been using just customer feedback to guide it, instead of saying, this is what I want. It's like, this is what my customers want, or possible customers, which is the best way to pull it in. You know, it's not necessarily driven off what you may think is the best. It's about how do we improve the knowledge of people that have no experience up to this point.
You're dead right. And when you're kind of the expert on something, it can be a little bit hard to really know what somebody who is a beginner really wants. So I think getting that feedback is important, and just keep testing and refining as you go. It's a lot of work, but I think it's necessary if you want to build a really, really great experience for your members.
One last thing I wanted to ask was around, you know, turning that interest in, like, and monetizing it. So, you know, it looks to me that it's an obvious choice for someone like yourself that has 25 years experience or whatever to do this, to create a course. But for younger people who are starting out, it's quite difficult, you know. So what's your thoughts on, like, you know, gaining that experience to be able to monetize it into a service like you're doing with a course or some other aspect? Do you need like several years experience? And what would be your kind of advice for people? Because people would have a similar ambition. Do they need to have 5, 10 years experience to really do it?
That's a really good question. I think one problem that a lot of people run into is the so-called imposter syndrome. You know, I've been doing this for 5 years. You know, who am I to teach other people? I don't feel like I'm qualified. And I had this in a different area of my life. I mean, I was back in 2017, I think it was. I flew up to Thailand, spent some time with my sensei in Jeet Kune Do. It was actually called a Sifu, but you know, a lot of people aren't familiar with that term. And I became a certified Jeet Kune Do instructor. And I kind of thought, well, you know, I've been doing this for a while, and you know, I've done a week-long sort of instructors, you know, course where they basically try and break you and convince you this isn't the path you want to take. But came out the other side. But then I had a bit of imposter syndrome. I thought, you know, compared to my Sifu, I'm woefully inexperienced. And you know, this guy trained with Ted Wong, who was Bruce Lee's last private student. And I kind of thought, well, who am I to teach people Jeet Kune Do compared to my Sifu? And he kind of said, well, look at it like this, Simon. You know more about Jeet Kune Do than 7.9 billion other people on the planet. You know,
So interesting
and
that
it's
perspective.
I kind of thought, yeah, I really do. You know, and I think if you're teaching people, look, the more experience, the more intuition, the more innately you know something, the better off you are. But you don't have to be the world's best. In fact, you probably only have to be 3 or 4 chapters ahead of them in the book. You know what I mean?
100%. You literally took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, in a very simplistic way, you just got to know more than the next person. Now, obviously, you don't want to
Yeah.
just be one step ahead, but you just need to be able to provide what my friend calls it is not page one of Google advice. So if you can provide something that you can't find on Google, and I thought it was very interesting, therefore you can
That's a
provide
good
a
way
bit
to
more
put it,
value.
actually. I like that.
So like for instance, if you were
Yeah.
trying to advise people how to do one thing, it's like, okay, not telling you like what to do, it's telling you like why and how that's better or worse. And I think that's
Yeah.
where you get a lot of advice and feedback. So if you are building a course, it's like you need to get something a bit more detailed, because actually the same friend actually has with 3 4 years experience actually in trading. And his criticism of courses was that he could have found everything else. He could have found this information online elsewhere. So even though that they were explaining the basics and going through, and I think he spent a lot of money actually, in fact, on courses. It was like 400 quid a month, I think the subscription was. He was saying fundamentally, if I wanted to go find it, I could have found it elsewhere. So maybe, I don't know what you kind of think, but that's probably like you need to provide that extra layer of information for people that have paid and want a good service.
I think that's key. I mean, you've got to be adding value over and above what is free, but also the way you structure a course. I mean, I've really structured and engineered my course to take people who become a member through a journey where they go from a beginner to an intermediate, a beginner to a student to an intermediate to a professional trader. They are all necessary steps that you need to go through. You just don't want to get stuck at any one. And what happens to a lot of people who learn trading by reading, watching YouTube clips for free, or, reading free articles, is they get stuck. They'll get stuck at the beginner stage, or they'll get stuck at the intermediate stage, because there isn't a curriculum in place to kind of push them through to the end. And, learning trading, it's not just about learning a bunch of setups. Learning risk management is really, really important, and not just risk about when you're in a trade, but how to manage the risk of your portfolio. And then what really separates wannabes from professionals is psychology and mindset. And that's something you need to learn, I think, from somebody who's been there and done it.
Which is why you need a mentor. And actually, that was when you launched your kind of latest kind of series on YouTube, that's one thing when I commented on saying that's what's really lacking, is that extra layer of detail that you see online for trading. It's like, okay, this is like how we do it, but really getting into the super detail is what I haven't seen anyway, and what a lot of people that are my age, or it could be just more difficult to find. But like the devil is in the detail with a lot of stuff. So you need to be able to get into that lower level of detail to really become experienced. And capping out in everything is really common. You can get fit and look pretty decent in clothes, but to get super, super fit and to get, build a lot of muscle, for instance, is a difficult, hard process. And it's kind of the 80-20 rule, if you think about it. You could get up and going and pretty much anything. You're a smart dude. I can imagine you could pick up anything and become really good at it. But to get to an exceptional level, I think you'd need to have those a time and patience,
Yeah. And I mean, getting fit, everybody, not everybody, but a common theme will be, I want to get fit. I'll go and lift weights. And you go to the gym and you lift weights. And, if you've never done any exercise before and you start lifting weights, you'll probably notice some improvement. But it's more about just going to the gym and lifting weights. You've got to have a workout program. You've got to have a regime. And if you haven't got things like your nutrition and your sleep sorted as well, your results are going to be inconsistent and unpredictable. And it's the same in trading. Like lifting weights is like learning some trading setups. But learning things like risk management, psychology, mindset, that's where you're getting your sleep and your nutrition and your workout strategies kind of sorted. Doing one without the others is going to yield inconsistent results that are not kind of forecastable.
Yeah, of course. And that's where you got to be patient as well, because even if you have consistency, to be patient to say, okay, this is going to take me X amount of years or X amount of months, that's also more important than just going to the gym, doing a workout and running away from it,
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a way of
or giving up when you're still sore 3 days after. Yeah.
Of course. And
which can happen, right? Yeah.
Of course. But the last one I would say as well is that's where a lot of people don't kind of break through, because they're capped out, because they think, oh, I'm at this stage and I'm not really improving. But if they were to stick through it and stay with it, that's where they're breaking down those small miniature problems over time, and whether if it is just something to do with fitness and training in the gym, you're working yourself through those tiny problems and getting to the other end and saying, oh, look at all the progress I've made then over the last 6-12 months. And you get the real benefit then.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So I would say a massive thank you. I think this has been an awesome, really, really helpful session, because it's great to see all the work you've done over the last 20 years and now how it's completely flipped into a different way of providing this educational service.
No, thank you, Darren. I'm really enjoying it. It's kind of sharing knowledge, teaching, if you want to call it that, is something that I really, really enjoy. And I find it extremely gratifying when I see people, get those light bulb moments and, the penny drops. It's something that I really enjoy. And I plan to be doing this for a lot longer.
Of course. And where can people find all of your stuff at the moment? Like, where do you have everything housed?
So my website is www.taooftrading.com. And I've got a YouTube channel by the same name, Tao of Trading. So the YouTube channel is pretty new. I've only got a couple of videos up there, but that's I find short videos is actually a great way of getting information across, because I can flip from one chart to another, and it's very hard to do in a post or even a blog format.
Of course, yeah. And it's so much more scalable as well, because you'll catch those YouTube algos eventually and they can really be pushed up to more people. So and there's a lot of value in YouTube once you can utilize it quickly, well, and you've done a great job so far. But I think because consistency, and I think it could grow really well, because there's that lack for sure on YouTube.
Oh, thanks, Darren.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I say a massive thank you, and I really appreciate it.